Hey there, and welcome to part 2 of Anatomy of a Cymbal. In part 1, I discussed the bell of a cymbal and how that changes the overall sound, and I've linked that below. But here in part 2, we're going to deal with the profile, which is the shape of the curvature from the base of the bell out to the edge of the cymbal. So in my mind, the profile is arguably the most important factor in a cymbal that determines what kind of sound it's going to have. And I've said this in many other videos, but in general, you can't really talk about one characteristic of a cymbal without touching on all the others because they all play together to create the overall sound. But in this series, I'm really trying to give you a flyby view of what a certain element will do to the sound of a cymbal and give you examples of that element in different specs so you can hear the difference with what I'm talking about. So first off, let's go super basic with it. The profile or the curvature of the cymbal is going to do two things to the sound. Overgeneralizing, but two things to the sound. First off, if we have a low shape, then we're going to have a low fundamental pitch, and the material itself is going to be able to move a little bit easier. So if you think about flapping like a thin piece of metal, if it's totally flat, it's going to flap easier. Whereas if it's all in a crazy shape or it's curved a lot, it's not going to want to flap as easy. So the reverse with that is true. We get into a higher profile height and the pitch goes up, but also the material gets a little bit more choked and it doesn't want to sustain as easily and as clearly. So when we're dealing with the shape of a cymbal, the profile shape of the cymbal, we really have to factor in the height. Some people will say low profile, high profile. Others will say big profile, small profile, things like that. Basically, we're just talking about the curvature of that metal and how much it curves, where it curves, and all of the little nuances that go along with that. This is not a one-dimensional aspect where it just has a certain curvature. There could be minute little curvatures happening all along the body of the cymbal. You can have a hook out towards the edge where it dives faster. You can have a hook in the middle or up near the bell. You can have even have little troughs and little dips and peaks. That dives into topography, which I talk about in a separate video. But the profile can really be designed and manufactured in a number of different ways to produce different sounds. So that's the super bare bones, boiled down take on profile. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the camera around and we're going to talk about some specific examples. First up is the cymbals I have in front of me here. These are 3 22-inch cymbals that are all around the exact same weight. They have the exact same bell that's been hammered the exact same way. And the only difference with these cymbals is the shape that they're in. And that way you're going to really be able to hear just how much of a difference the profile height really does play in the overall sound. Then we're going to dive into a couple other examples of profiles, and I'll just talk through each individual one so you can hear exactly what I'm describing, and you guys can let me know what you think. All right, so like I said, I've got 3 22s up, and they all have approximately the same weight. They're all right around 2,450 grams. They have the same pressed bell that has been hammered the exact same way, and they actually even have the same amount of taper towards the edge, so how much it thins near the edge. So I really was trying with these 3 cymbals to isolate the profile shape. And these cymbals are not finished. These are very much in process, but I kind of stopped them 3/4 of the way through to illustrate this point because they really, really sound different, even though so many elements of them are the same. So with the profile shaping of a cymbal, the thing I always want to make sure with all of my cymbals that they have is that they have a strong trajectory that goes up and into the bell. I don't ever want to see my cymbals dip below before it hits the transition into the bell. That'll just cause a mushy sound. It'll cause kind of a muddy, ill-defined thing, and it will most likely have honks and hums and kind of weird overtones that aren't pleasant to play. That's a general rule. There are some. I've played some cymbals. I've played some spizzes and some old Ks that had dips and kind of dives before they hit the bell, and they sounded great. But in general, I really want a strong trajectory up until my bell. So I always start like this cymbal on the left. This is the lowest shaped cymbal. It still has a trajectory to the bell. It doesn't dip anywhere, but it's low. It's kind of flatter. With each cymbal, as it goes down the line here, it gets bigger and bigger, the profile. What I'm doing is I'm basically taking the portion from the edge of the cymbal or the middle of the cymbal out to the edge, and I'm just kind of building it up a little bit. So I'm kind of coming into my stick more like this rather than flat like it is on the far left one. So I'm building it up, building it up. This building increases the overall height, but I still have movement all the way up into my bell. It doesn't sink or flatten or dip before it hits the bell. That's a hugely important thing to note, and I'll talk more about that later in the video. But for now, these three cymbals are just 3 stages of profile height in the same cymbal, basically. I'll play it with 2 different sticks, and you guys can let me know what you think. All right, so as you can hear, wildly different sounds coming from basically the same cymbal. The only thing different being that shape. So over here on the left, I have a low shape, and like I said, my stick is coming into much more of a flat curvature rather than a built-up curvature or a curved thing like this. So I'm getting much more of a cushiony feel, and the only thing that's the only thing that's the saving grace on this left cymbal is that it's got the weight that it has, 2,450 grams. That's really where the stick definition is coming from, because if this was much thinner, it would basically be a big crash. And when I hit the stick, when I hit the cymbal with the stick on the bow, it really would sound pretty mushy and ill-defined, and the wash would overtake the stick really quick. With these cymbals over here on the right, they really can, they could be thinner and still maintain stick clarity. And that's the whole thing of building that profile shape up taller, can give you the ability to have a thinner cymbal that still maintains definition. So I really love the one on the far right, even though it's not finished. I like cymbals that are kind of in this realm, which this isn't technically tall. I'm going to show you a cymbal later on in the video that is very, very tall, and you'll get a sense for what the extremes, the extreme of a tall shaped cymbal, what that sounds like. This one is pretty much like in a medium tall place, and this is really where I like my cymbals to be. I like some of my cymbals to be in this realm. I don't hardly ever make cymbals that are here. The only time that I'll do that really is when I'm making a rock and roll ride, and it's a ride that needs to cut and be super clear on the stick, but still crash and have a low pitch that's not super abrasive to the ear. I'll make a low shape like this, but in a 22-inch size, I'll make it 2,800 grams, maybe even 3,000, 3,200 grams, and you'll have a great rock and roll ride. It'll have a low fundamental, but the clarity will be there because of the weight. So let's move on to some other cymbals, and we'll keep diving down this rabbit hole. All right, so now we have the big profile cymbals, the tall shapes, the very, very large curvatures. These cymbals are very, very interesting. So on the far right, we have one of mine. This is a 22-inch of my Labyrinth series, and this one has a tall, big umbrella shape to it, but it also has a hook that you can kind of see right where my finger is. You can kind of trace it all the way around. It's got this hook on the cymbal where the cymbal's curvature dives pretty hard at the edge. This cymbal was designed to replicate the shape of the Nefertiti cymbal. Many guys come to me and ask, can you make the Nefertiti ride? The Nefertiti ride was the ride that Tony Williams used on the Miles Davis record Nefertiti. He used it on a bunch of other stuff too, and it's an iconic ride sound. And it had a very similar shape to this one. It also is sort of heavy. So we're going with a bigger shape that's also heavy, which is typically a no-no, but the way that I've gotten around that and sort of blended it well is it's got crazy topography to it, wild hammering, and very deep pin lathing to it. So with this cymbal, we have this flange right here, which almost gives us a surface where we can smack it with the side of the stick, and it gives you this really clear, almost like bell tone. Maybe not like fully a bell tone, but it's like you can get this very articulate side stick sound where you're kind of broadsiding the cymbal with the side of the stick, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Very interesting sound to my ear. This is a 22, and it weighs almost 2,700 grams. So heavy, tall, very unique, and great for certain purposes. This cymbal here is not a cymbal that I made. This is a cymbal that my buddy Dave Collingwood made, Bristol-based cymbalsmith. I had him make me a cymbal. I didn't give him very many parameters. You might have even seen the video. I posted one a few weeks back where I unboxed the cymbal and played it. This cymbal has got a crazy tall shape, and it doesn't have any kind of hook, so it's a pretty smooth trajectory all the way up into that bell from here, but man, is it tall. And it's got a fully hand-formed bell that's rather tall as well. And this is one of the best sounding, if you were to tell me what this cymbal is on paper, I'd say, it probably wouldn't be for me. But this is one of the best sounding ones I've ever come across as far as tall shaped cymbals. So we're getting into Tallville, which means we're going to have some certain characteristics coming out, which I haven't talked about this yet. The thing that comes along with that higher pitch, I talked about the umbrella shape. As it gets taller, the pitch goes up. We also get a characteristic that people describe as dragon's breath. They describe as a ka kind of sound, ka, rather than tss. It's a little bit more rounded, and you get a little bit less sibilance, which sibilance is like the S sound. You get a little bit less sibilance with the taller shaped cymbals. So with this cymbal, we're really going to hear kind of a trashy, complex, aggressive roar. Actually, really, with both of these cymbals, it's going to have kind of this sort of roar to it, which that characteristic kind of comes alongside the higher pitch thing when the cymbal gets taller and taller. As you get, lower shapes tend to have smoother sounds, more rather than I don't know if that translates well through the mic, but we're going with it. You get smoother sounds, basically. You get warmer, more mellow, more gushy sounds. And as you get into those taller shapes, it gets a little bit more aggressive, it gets a little bit more angry, and it gets a little bit more in your face. So let's check out how these two sound. Woo! Yeah, you hear that? Woke up on the wrong side of the bed this morning. All right, so I should have been wearing hearing protection when I was filming that video, because these things are much more in your face. They feel a little bit more abrasive sitting behind them, but they can translate in a really beautiful way. And a great way of illustrating this is just to talk about Bill Stewart's ride sound. A lot of jazz drummers love Bill Stewart's sound. He uses umbrella-shaped cymbals that are rather tall. A lot of his cymbals, though, have a lower bell and a wider bell, which actually helps offset some of the shrillness that those tall-shaped cymbals can have. But that's the kind of sound he gets, and you really hear it on the records. It sounds so interesting. Like, it's just complex and dirty, a little bit trashy, and it's just kind of, it really draws you in an interesting way. But when you sit behind those cymbals, they're a little bit more unwieldy. They're a little bit louder. They could be a little bit more in your face and hard on your ears when you're sitting on the kit. But when they translate out in front of the kit, man, do they sound amazing. So these are two of the tallest cymbals I've got in my shop right now. I didn't mention it, but this is a 23-inch, and it weighs around 2,600 grams, I believe. And this one, like I said, 22-inch at 2,700 grams. So the weight difference in this one is pretty significant. This guy is really a great cymbal if you're playing almost like jazz rock or fusion or rock and roll even, or just something real heavy. You want a bell that cuts and articulation and clarity that's really going to cut through a loud band. That's the kind of cymbal that this one would be great for. And this one kind of lives in the middle. I could play it in some louder environments. I could play it in a rock context. But I could also play it in some lower volume stuff because of that bigger diameter is giving it a little bit lower of a pitch, even considering it's such a tall cymbal. So that's the high profiles. Now we're going to move on to a couple of flat rides, and this will also help kind of illustrate profile, curvature, all that jazz. All right, so for these flat rides, I have one of my 20-inch Prism flat rides, and then I've got a flat ride that I've modified recently. I wish I had one of my original Prisms in stock to kind of show this side of it, but I don't right now. So we're using something that I've modified. This was a Zildjian K-Light ride, and it was, I believe, around 2,100 grams. But what I've done is I've shaved it, hammered it a little bit. It's down right around 1,800 grams. And this one is also right around 1,800 grams. So these have a very similar weight, and they have a big difference, though. So the difference on the one on the far right, mine, is that it has much more of a triangular shape. So the highest point really is up at that bell hole, and it continues to curve all the way up to that point. It has kind of like this shape to it, sort of triangular like that. Whereas this mod arcs and then flattens off before it hits the bell. So it's got much more of a arc and flat, whereas this one is kind of arc all the way up until the bell hole. So what we're going to get sonically from these sounds is it's going to be very interesting to hear. I really want to know what you guys think about this illustration, given especially that it doesn't have the bell. These don't have the bells. So this is really showing in a great way the kind of roundness and kind of tonality that comes from taller shaped cymbals. Whereas this one here on the left that has more of an arc and flattens off, it has much more sibilance to it. It has much more of a bright, glassy shimmer to the sound, whereas this one has a dark, brooding kind of sort of thing to the sound. Now, the other differences to note in these two cymbals is that the topography is greater on mine. This has a little bit more of a smooth topography and smooth lathing. This has deeper lathing. So those things are definitely playing a role in how these sound. However, you'll hear what I mean by kind of the brighter, glassier, shimmerier thing in this one, if that's a word. And you'll hear more of a dark, brooding thing, ka kind of sound in the one on the right. So let's check them out. Now, this is where your ears can get a little bit tricked, because to me, sitting behind it, I would almost guess that this one is lower pitched than this one, even though this one is taller. So that is coming from a couple different things. I'll just mention that the topography and the depth of the lathing is definitely drawing out a darker sound from this cymbal, and the shallowness of the lathing on this one and the smoothness of the surface is drawing out a brighter shimmery thing in this one. So it's kind of tricking your ears, even though this one's a lower shape. This one feels brighter and glassier, and this one being a taller shape, yeah, it's interesting. So drop a comment. Let me know if you heard the same thing that I heard. But I will say this is a taller shaped cymbal, and the other thing is that it doesn't have quite as much curvature out towards the outer half of the cymbal, but overall it is a bigger shape. And this, to me, illustrates also is a great illustration of surface topography and how that affects the sound, because we're really tricking ourselves into thinking this one has got a lower pitch, just because we have a bright glassy thing coming from this cymbal here. All right, in this section I want to talk about rapid changes in the trajectory on the profile. So I alluded to this earlier in the video about having a hook or a flange at one portion of the profile, to where you're not necessarily dealing with a perfectly flowing transition, flowing shape up into the bell. These three cymbals I've pulled represent different types of rapid changes in trajectory, or hooks or flanges, or whatever you want to call them. So over here on my left, I have a 20-inch cymbal that's very thin. It's, I think, under 1,800 grams. It has a little downward flange at the edge. You can't really see it in the light, but it changes direction rather fast right down at the edge. This is the cymbal that was in the heavy cymbal, or the tall, big profile cymbal and heavy cymbal section. And you can really see the flange on this one if you just kind of follow the trajectory around here. You can see the ring that I've hammered in to have it downward flange near the edge. And then over here on the far right, we have a swish cymbal, which is a extreme example of a rapid change in trajectory. We have a shape that comes down, and then as it gets to here, it flattens off and it actually bends upwards. So you're going to see in three stages, three levels of extremity, what these flanges will do to the sound of a cymbal. In general, a change in direction in a cymbal is going to contain some of the spread and create a drier sound, a sound that hits heavy and sort of dies fast. And these flanges and hooks can be wonderful to design into jazz cymbals, or cymbals where you want a lot of control in a thin cymbal that can get out of the way, so that it really won't muddy up the stick definition and the patterns that you're playing. So the extreme example obviously is the swish over here. It's got 6 brass rivets in it. It's going to be super trashy, super aggressive, and it's going to hit really heavy, and there's hardly any sustain. It dies very fast. And then over here, you've already heard this cymbal, but you'll get it in context. And then this one is a much more milder version. So let's check out these cymbals and see what we think. right, so as you can hopefully hear, there's varying degrees of trashiness in all of these cymbals, varying degrees of complexity and grittiness, however you want to say it. Hooks, flanges, changes in rapid changes in trajectory. These will do that to a cymbal sound. So if you have a nice flowing arc, you can imagine a sort of flowing sound. If you have jagged edges and changes and peaks and troughs, you can imagine kind of an aggressive sound, a little bit more complex and gritty and less smooth. This is exactly what this stuff does to the sound of a cymbal, and especially when you hook the edge, like all three of these have hooks at the edge. You could make hooks up further in the cymbal, and it would still kind of generally do the same thing of adding a level of trash to the sound, a level of grit and imperfection to the sound. But more often than not, you're going to find these hooks and flanges out towards the edge, and it's just kind of acting like a little it acts almost in a way like rubber, how rubber stops vibration. Like these flanges can stop vibration in a way, or at least slow them down. And the result you get is a more dry sound. And like I've said too many times in this section, a trashy, a gritty, a complex sound. All right, so last up in this profile video, we're going to talk about these two cymbals. So we have two 21-inch cymbals. This one here on the right is 2,185 grams. This one on the left is 2,160 grams. So we're within 25 grams of each other. This is a tributary from my tributary series. This is a landmark. And we have two different profiles. This one right here is a great example of a very uniform, big profile. So it's got this big arcing curve all the way up to the bell, from the edge all the way up to the bell. It arcs, it's big, it's kind of built out this way into where you would play. And this one has a similar shape, just kind of shrunk lower. And so you're going to hear in a really great way how much we can affect, as cymbalsmiths, how much we can affect the stick articulation versus the wash. And you're going to hear more of a billowing wash with this one. It's going to kind of open up and gather around the sound, and this one's going to feel a lot less built up. It's going to be much more in the background behind the stick definition. So let's check them out. Obviously, we have the higher pitch, lower pitch thing going on, but to me, when I really dig in and I want to have a cymbal that goes with me and gets me to the place I want to be in, that higher dynamic range, and I want that cymbal to be clear, I'm going to go for that cymbal all day. I'm a really big fan of this cymbal, how it turned out. This one here, I'm gonna have it for more nuanced, mellow situations where I'm gonna be playing lighter, and I want to be able to open up a nice crash very easily without much effort. And I could also dig in and get this explosive crash, but I know that my stick definition isn't going to go with me near as much as it will with this cymbal. And that's why, when I make my cymbals, most of them, I'm really paying most attention to the stick definition that I want to have. And when a cymbal is arced and curved in such a way like this one is, it gives me so much on the stick that I love and I feel like can go with me wherever I want to go in the music. Cymbals like this, I gravitate towards all the time when I'm playing certain types of gigs, and especially for studio work. This kind of cymbal is really beautiful and amazing. But I really, personally, my personal taste is I gravitate towards these bigger profile cymbals that, they're not so tall that they get into kind of that super aggressive range. I wouldn't say the Collingwood cymbal is super aggressive, but you could hear it's got more anger to it, a little bit more ornery of a sound that is great for certain environments. Whereas a cymbal like this is really great for a lot of environments. It's going to give me what I want in low volume situations, but it's going to go with me when I want to really dig in as well. So I can still get a nice crash out of this, and I still feel like it's giving me complexity and nuance, but it's also going there when I want to dig in more. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. Like you heard in all of the clips, there is a huge difference that takes place when you have a different shape in that curvature from the bell to the edge. I really want to know what you guys think, and have you ever really dove into this concept much when you're thinking about cymbals? Do you think about that curvature and that height? I know a lot of times we'll kind of deal in the extremes, and we'll think about really low shapes or really, really tall shapes, and we don't dive so much into the nuances in the middle, but that's really where I like to play. So I would say that all of the cymbals that I've shown you in this video would live within the extremes. The tall profile cymbals that I played are not the tallest that I've seen, certainly, that I've modified, certainly. They're very much within the grounds of cymbals that I really gravitate towards, cymbals I really like. They have characteristics of cymbals that are very versatile and functional, and characteristics of cymbals that I love to hear on recordings. So the tallest cymbals I played for you guys, still cymbals I would use on my gig. Even that low-shaped 22 on my left earlier, I'd play that one on a gig for certain things. And then there's all this ground in the middle to kind of, as a cymbal maker, to adjust the profile height and really get the exact kind of sound I'm looking for, or just an inspiring sound. Oftentimes I don't even know what I'm looking for when I'm making a cymbal. I just know I want it to be a part of one of my series, like I want it to be a landmark series or a labyrinth. And I have vague parameters that I'm shooting for with those cymbals as I'm starting a blank. But many times I'm just responding to the metal and seeing what is it telling me? Where is the metal wanting to move? And I follow that. And oftentimes it leads to interesting, surprising places. Sometimes I'll make cymbals way taller than I thought I wanted to, just because it's sounding so good. I keep going. And other times I really rein it in and try to keep the shape controlled so that I'm not building it up into this huge umbrella, because I'm going after a certain sound. So all of these cymbals that I played here, except for the modification and the Collingwood, are cymbals that I work on, and I'm working on for commissions and for my batch drops. I drop a batch of cymbals about once a month, and I do commissions all the time. So if you want to check out my cymbals or learn more about what I do, you can head over to reveriedrums.com. I've got a product category where you can look up Timothy Roberts cymbals and see all of the cymbals that I have available for purchase. And then you can also see the cymbal commissions, and you can commission me to make you a cymbal to your specs. So anyway, please drop a comment below and let me know what you think of these cymbals. Which one was your favorite? Do you like high profile? Do you like low profile? Like, what is your jam? Drop a comment below, and hit the subscribe and the bell if you want notifications, and keep an eye out for the next video in the series, which is to be decided. Keep an eye out for that, because that'll come soon. And anyway, thanks so much for watching. I'm Timothy Roberts.